Wrestling hasn't always been a show. Before the show came the sport, the oldest sport known to mankind, with many forms in many cultures. In a corner of England in the county of Lancashire, a style of the sport evolved that was to change wrestling history forever. Catch as catch can, or catch, the Lancashire style, has influenced wrestling across the world, but in its native home now lies almost forgotten.
How's Mr. Woods today?
Champion.
Eh?
Champion.
Enjoy this sunny weather while you're here.
Well, it lasses.
With my mate, has Tommy Choplin in?
Just gone.
Has he any remarks about me?
Yeah, have you got another medal?
We go back as far as
Wait till I see him, I'll kill him.
1908, when Tommy Rose was like our first wrestler that wrestled what they call freestyle. That was the bar holds was put on, submissions was put on. They were coming out of the mills and coming out of the pits, and there was nearly all these type of persons, the hardcore lads, that fancied the wrestling. They either did it or they didn't. They either liked it or they didn't like it. They didn't like getting hurt. That was it. They didn't do the job. They played football and things like that. They used to put money on a wrestler. Oh, McGuffey could do this and McGuffey could do that. Oh, I've got somebody, Tommy, who can lick thee, you know. Oh, no, there's not. Oh, yeah, I have. You know, right, well, we'll sort it out on Pit Brown when we come after work, you see. And they used to come out of the pit, step up, and they'd wrestle. They'd wrestle on shale. They'd wrestle on shale. They were that hard, these men, you know.
It was called catch as catch can. That's what it's all about. It's the thinking ahead. You give something to get something.
When you walk onto a wrestling mat or when you go into a wrestling club and you start to wrestle, you're participating in a link to the world's past, to the past of civilizations long gone. Gilgamesh of ancient Sumer and Enkidu engaged in a great wrestling match, and at the funeral games of Patroclus at the Iliad, Achilles sponsored a wrestling match, and all through history wrestling has been so important. So when you engage in a wrestling match, you're participating in something that binds civilization together. It goes back 4,000 or 5,000 years.
I mean, in ancient Greece, when you used to have all the philosophers and people like that, a lot of them, obviously ancient Greece and wrestling go hand in hand. And guys like Plato and things like that, they used to be wrestlers. So I'm told anyway, I don't know. Obviously with the Greek connections. So I'm in good company, should think so.
Mark Cocker is a philosophy student at Manchester University. He is also a wrestler. Having trained in the martial arts and achieved success as a junior, Mark's instructor advised him that if he wanted to compete in combat sports at the highest level, he should take up freestyle wrestling. Mark was 14 when he first went to the Bolton Olympic Wrestling Club to try his luck on the mat. Now, aged 19, he is widely regarded as one of Britain's major prospects in the sport.
I always loved things like football and stuff at school and running and things like that. But I've always been one of those lads who, when I was a young lad, I always liked the rough and tumble and things like that. And football and things like that didn't offer enough for me. I wanted to go down to like contact sport. My dreams were always I wanted to go to the Olympics, Commonwealth Games, things like that. To this day now, I still go back and train with the martial arts. I've got many friends there, and they've just been a real backbone. If it wasn't for them, then I wouldn't have got into the wrestling and I wouldn't be the person I am today, because he taught me about respect, he taught me about the importance of training, the dedication and things like that.
I try to convince myself that I'm not biased, and I actually have to be, but I'm hoping in reality I'm not. But I think it is the sport that probably requires more disciplines than any other sport, just to be able to excel at it. And because of that, it's unique, and I call it the high bar. I call it the high bar of sports. And I always say this, I say that it's not for everyone, but it should be, because of the values.
Both wrestlers, with the referee at one side, and we face each other on the white circle.
I just love to be around the gym. John Rigby was there, and even though he was getting on in the years, he used to always great time for you to step on the mat, and he'd be showing you some moves, maybe that, you know, old moves that people have forgot.
He came here like he won the world sambo, schoolboy sambo wrestling, you see. Trained by Trevor Roberts, who lives in the next block here. Now, I trained Trevor Roberts, and Trevor was one of my good boys, and he'd been training with Mark, so like he said, well, when they goes to that club, he said, get John Rigby trained, eh?
In a way, it's a bit of an oldie worldy club. Like when you walk in there, you can tell it's got history with all the old pictures on the wall and stuff. A lot of clubs you can walk into in gyms and you feel intimidated by the people that are there, these big guys, and they might not be that friendly, what have you, but as soon as you walk into the Bolton Wrestling Club, you know, the atmosphere is brilliant, and they made you feel at home, and that's why I stuck at it.
Well, it's good exercise anyway, and I think it's when you have a good club and it keeps going. It's the old, what give over wrestling, still putting the time in to teach. They're down at our club, they still go down and teach from youngsters. And they have young children wrestling. And it's good for the game, isn't it?
At 80 years of age, Jimmy Niblett still climbs Bolton's Winter Hill every Sunday. A war veteran, a miner, and a quarryman, Jimmy was also a champion Lancashire wrestler who had his own dreams of amateur glory.
I was in the quarries, and the money was very little, really. Shifting 50, 60 ton a day, every day, in a gang of men, four or five in a team, at 5p a ton. 5p a ton, you cannot believe it. So you can understand how I had, and I was shifting 50 ton to 60 ton. And same with wrestling. You have to go, you have to do more.
I don't know whether he's older than me or I'm older than him, I don't know. But I always called Jimmy Niblett the man of granite, because when you look at him, he looks as though he's just been chiselled out of granite. Well, he wrestled like that. He used to come across with that face, but that's why my nose is like that, because that's who Jimmy Niblett, that.
I don't know. I always seem to be that bit ahead, and by doing more. It upset me really a little bit not to go to the Olympics. What happened, I was footballing too, you know, I footballed 20 years nearly, in Marines, and when they wanted me to go to London for Slough, for final pickings, I as he got the time, same time as I should have gone to Slough, the week before, I was in this competition, and it was Saturday, and we drew like, and we had to play Monday. And I'm going down bloody Wednesday to London, where I should have been resting and not bother about the football. And I get a kick, don't I? I'm limping like, and I couldn't go down. And then these boils opened up all at the same time, so I couldn't go for final pickings. The gym was upset, the sheet were black, terrible. They used to put everything in this cubby hole where the boiler were. Carrybuncles they were, never mind boils. Like when you've always been on your own and no father to help you, you know, they're always there to help you, aren't they? And speak for you, say like, don't play that much, you've summoned on and plan more. You plan later when you get older, don't you? But that's how it just went by the way, and I never got down, 48.
Wigan is a name I've heard for 10 or 12 years as just a mystical place, almost like Camelot in reverse. Once I started really understanding the history of wrestling and delving into it, the name Wigan just continued to come up, and Billy Riley and the Snake Pit. Here in America, everybody talks about Dan Gable's University of Iowa wrestling room, where They say there's great wrestlers, 4-time state champions and national champions who come into the Iowa room and leave after a week. They just can't take it. To me, Wigan even has a more mythical tone to it than the University of Iowa wrestling room during the Gable era, during the 80s when the Hawkeyes were invincible. There's just, as soon as you say Wigan in pro wrestling circles, heads turn. And when you say Bill Riley, eyebrows go up and say, what do you know? Because there's just an aura there, just an awe that makes people who really understand or want to understand the true nature of professional wrestling and submission wrestling, what was going on in Wigan.
How I got with Wigan, there was a competition with Bert Royal in 10 stone. It was exhibition, more or less, you know, but a good wrestling bout. And when I finished, this man, Billy Riley, came to me. And he said, I've been watching you, I'm Billy Riley from Wigan. I'd like you to come. I'm going to open a gymnasium. I said, yes, definitely, I'll be there, you know, and that we're meeting him. It took about 6 weeks after that. But I used to call at his house, he gave me his address, and he said, I haven't opened it yet, but come in, and he'd have me on the carpet showing me. Oh, he was a fantastic fella. He'd be showing you, you know, I used to go from the pit straight to his house, and he'd have me on the carpet. He'd say, I'll be opening it, and he did.
Wrestling's been handed down in Wigan from generation to generation. I used to hear my mother talk about wrestlers, and she'd be over 100 now if she were living, but I wouldn't say it was as popular as what it was one time a day.
Billy Riley is a legend of wrestling. As an apprentice moulder, Billy trained in catch-as-catch-can with the Wigan Miners at a time when it was one of the most popular sports in Lancashire. In the 1920s, he went on to become the British Empire champion, winning the title in South Africa. Billy later opened his own gym, which was to develop a reputation that is unsurpassed in wrestling circles. One of the last wrestlers to be trained by Billy Riley was Roy Wood. Roy, with the help of friends and family, has kept the tradition of Billy Riley's alive. The club continues to operate in new premises under the name of Aspel Olympic Wrestling Club.
Come on, let's get you going.
I just stumbled in the gym on Sunday morning and sat in the corner and thought nobody had noticed me. And that happened for quite a long while. I used to just creep in at the back and watch all these men wrestle, and I was fascinated with them all. And then Billy Wright turned round to me and said, look, if you won't keep coming, bring some stuff and have a go. Instead of just keep sitting there every Sunday morning, bring a swimming costume and a pair of trainers and have a go at it. It wasn't training as such. You used to just go on the back mat, and they all treated you as if you were a world champion. Everybody got stuck in you, nobody made any allowances for you.
Who's these two, Billy?
Ron Wood and hello, Bob. How you doing?
Oh,
Is that Dempsey?
Hi, how are you, Billy?
Stand up, David. Put some gusto in it. Now, wait, see. As soon as he put his hand on the floor, put your hand on the floor like that. Square that road a bit and not put your nose. See, he should have grabbed that arm like that, put his head on the floor. You understand? Put this leg over here and pull him over here like that. See that arm now?
Yeah, Billy.
Yeah. Well, do it. Make him go his head on the floor. That's it. Now put your leg over. Pull and let go. That's it. That's the idea. Do you see? Do you see? You understand me? You see the idea now?
Yeah.
Every region, every town, I suppose, developed its own style and kept to their own areas. Lancashire, catch-as-catch-can, developed in the East Lancashire area. Cornish wrestling developed in Cornwall and Devon. Cumberland and Westmoreland in the sort of area that we now know as the Lake District. Yorkshire, Scotland, they all had their own style.
Just right back to the old miners, because Wigan was a pit town and there was a man in every field. For entertainment, you used to wrestle one another.
They had side stake bets, you see. They say, oh, like I'll have a pint on Sunny Derby, I'll have a pint on this, you see. And it eventually turned into money.
Billy, he learned off all the old timers, all the old miners, and his mother used to back him wrestling, and they'd fix a match up, and even when Billy was 15, he was fighting all the top men and the top miners, and they put a lot of money down, which hundreds of pounds in them days, which was a fortune, and they said when Billy won that his mother would go and buy a row of houses, and they owned a lot of property. The gyms consisted of back of pubs or upstairs in pubs, and there was moved from one pub to another for various reasons, and then in the end half a dozen of the wrestlers contributed to buy some land, and they bought some land in Welly, and between them there was they were doing their own brickwork and joining and electricity, and they built their own gym between them, and they said they'd never get moved again, and that's the beginning of Riley's gym.
It was a working man's club like we are, you know, like in Bridgman Street we call it the old tin hut because it had a tin roof on in Bridgman Street, you see, and we call it the old tin hut, you see, and Billy Riley's was very similar.
They could put a bar on. Now, a bar is against the bone. And at Bolton, they tell you that's not allowed. Not allowed. Anything against the bone, you know. Now, Wigan, they never bothered. Because they weren't in with the most amateurs. One or two used to wrestle. They come, you know. But they'd stop them if they put a bar on. What they call a bar, or around the throat.
It was always called catch as catch can. I think it would call that because you used to grab a fellow wherever you could.
A little demonstration is that I give you that hand there, I've given it for a reason. It's like a magnet for a fish, because I know you're going to grab it. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to grab that wrist, and then I make me move. And that's why it's catch as catch can. I'm working 2 moves ahead. It's like a game of chess. I'm going for a standing throw. I might be working on your legs, but I want a standing throw of it. I don't want your legs at all. Although you think I'm going for your legs, I'm not. And that's what it's all about.
There was a lot of unwritten rules. Even though they were miners and very rough fellas, there was a gentleman's side to them. There was things what they didn't do. They didn't poke their fingers in their eyes. They didn't pull one another's hair. They didn't do various things which just weren't gentlemanly.
Tommy McGuffey, he worked in the pit. He was a miner came from Farnworth, and he became coach at the Bolton areas. But primarily, because his son, he was coaching his son, and he wouldn't let his son do what he did, and he wouldn't let his son train like he did. So he came to Bolton. His son's name is on that board now, Walter McGuffey, 7 times British flyweight champion, which is a fantastic record, isn't it?
Yeah, I had no idea you guys had a sport called catch as catch can. Well, that's the first time I ever, you know, I mean, I knew it was high school wrestling, but somebody started calling it catch as catch can. So we've had that name around for many, many years. We probably got it from you guys, I'm sure.
We're still winning with the old moves, what we taught then. The moves what the old miners did, we're still using these moves, but we've converted them to amateur wrestling. And we have one pupil, Paul Stridgeon, who is probably the most successful wrestler ever come out of Wigan in amateur wrestling, but no doubt about that. He's focused, he can't see anything, only amateur wrestling. He lives it, he sleeps it, he breathes amateur wrestling.
I remember the very first time my granddad took me down the tin hut and just bobbed my head inside. It was all dark and damp, and you think, whoa.
21-year-old Paul Stridgeon trains at Roy's Aspel Gym and is one of Britain's most successful amateur wrestlers of the last decade, having achieved a top 10 finishing position in the European Championships, something unprecedented in recent times in a field dominated by Eastern Europeans.
Yeah, he was actually 6 years of age when he expressed an interest to go and do a karate class. And he went once and wasn't too impressed. And my father and mother live in the same street as Tommy Moore, who's known as Jack Dempsey in wrestling circles. And he suggested that we take him down to the wrestling gym, which Roy had you know, the old Riley's gym at the back of Vine Street. I took him down there, and he took it from there, and he loved it from day one.
I remember being very intimidated by all the surroundings, and you could see the old iron weights rusting. There was a shower in the corner, nothing round it, and it was just cold water. And I mean, the mats were dirty, and everybody seemed bigger than me as well. It was really, really intimidating. Once you got into the thick of it, or started to get amongst it when it was wrestling, I just really enjoyed it from there. And you don't see all that then because you're part of that.
Today's amateur wrestling can be, directly traced back to Lancashire Catchers Catch Can. 1907 it was adapted into the National Sports Club. 1908 Lancashire Catchers Catch Can was an Olympic sport, and I just think it was from there that you saw the amateur movement take off. They took what was the basis of the sport, obviously built in the rules and things like the whole sort of structure of how the match was going to be wrestled. And when you look at the two styles today, you can obviously see the similarities.
I don't want to say use the word easy, but it became kind of natural for me to be able to just win. And there's a few sprinkled losses in there that maybe kept me straight, but it was pretty easy just to win on the mat.
Dan Gable has done more to take amateur wrestling into mainstream than any other person in American history. I'm from Dan's hometown, Waterloo, Iowa, and I've known Dan for 35 years. I've written 2 books about him. And Dan Gable is a fascinating individual. He had a horrible tragedy early in life. At age 14, his older sister was the victim of the worst murder in Waterloo history, savagely beaten and murdered. And that certainly left a deep scar, psychological scar, on Dan's makeup. Dan was already deeply into wrestling at that point. There was something about the solitude and the Spartan existence that really appealed to his nature, obviously. But when Diane was brutally murdered, that pushed Dan over the top. And he became the single most driven, obsessive athlete I have ever known. Nobody else is even close. In a world of amateur wrestlers where everybody works incredibly hard and has an incredible pain threshold, Gable was far beyond anything I've ever seen. And one of my dear friends, I can remember somebody saying, "Doesn't Gable get tired and feel fatigue and pain?" And this friend said, "Sure he does, just like everybody else. The difference is he can block it out and move on. He hurts, he gets tired, but he blocks it out and goes to the next level."
You must do more than the other one, in my opinion. Live it. I knew I'd get called up, and I didn't want the army. I always fancied the navy. And I went 3 times to Dover Street in Manchester. They said, "What's your job?" I said, "I'm quarrying and that." He said, "That's the army." But I wouldn't volunteer because I knew I wanted the navy like. I don't know why, I just fancied the sea. 3 times I went. The 3rd time, they said, "No, we've told you before." And there were a Marine on the wall blowing a boodle, and I said, "Can I join them?" More Marines, they're half and half. And they said, "Oh yes, you can join them." The training was chicken play. Easy. I never found anything as easy. I was that hard. It was no problem. But I never thought I were any better. I think a lot of them went in the service against it being conscripted, And but I volunteered and I enjoyed, and I'd have loved to stayed in me. I would. But I had an invalid mother who had a bone out of her hip. I felt I'll go and see the captain about if I can go back in the mines.
Eventually, when people started to see wrestling as a spectator sport, it was the Lancashire Catchers Catch Can which was seen as much more exciting to watch. And, it leads us up to sort of 17th, 18th century when in this area, the big industry was coal mining. And the coal miners carried this sport on. And when as a spectator sport, you know, there was money up for grabs, it became a way out of the coal mines.
In amateurs, all you got was certificates if you won a Lancashire championship.
As our lads turned pro, they didn't come to our club. They went to Riley's because there was nowhere teaching pro wrestling in Bolton.
And it was at the time when there was no television on wrestling. And I decided to go over, and it was a tremendous lot more money.
They used to wrestle straight for money, and it's same as any other sort of gambling. Sooner or later, somebody comes up and thinks of how to make a lot more money.
You got fellows in villages who had a match with a fellow at another village, and the local people would be putting their rent money on them, and they suddenly thought, right, they'd get one of their mates to back the other fellow and take a dive. That's where skullduggery came into wrestling. That's where it started off. One of the reasons the fellow who trained us, Billy Riley, had such a good name in Wigan, that everybody who backed him knew that the rent money was on a trier. He never took a dive in his life.
There are a lot of people out there who think wrestling's always been a work, and I absolutely don't agree with that. To say wrestling has always been a work is to say there was never a time where there were people, men, who cared more about who they were, their pride, and whether or not they could whip another person on a wrestling mat, than they cared about conning somebody or money.
Every year, British professional wrestlers, old and new, gather together to celebrate their much maligned trade. They gather to tell stories and reminisce about times when professional wrestlers were treated with respect and admiration.
I admired the real hard men of the game, Bert Hazarati, Jack Pye and people like that, Billy Robinson. That was just before my time. I wished I could have been in their era. I'd have got a real good hiding from them, but I would have enjoyed it, you know. If you'd trained in Riley's gym, you thought, oh, hey, this guy knows something. And it came out in the match. You ended up with cauliflower ears. Today's wrestling is different, you know. As I say, it's like over the top with showmanship. In Jack Pye and Bert Hazarati in their days, it was it's a man's world, a very, very strong, powerful way of, expressing yourself, wrestling.
Now it's just American rubbish. I mean, you've only got to look at it now. I mean, there's no wrestling around the world like there was. It's certainly more show businessy now, like, I think. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. Okay for the kids.
I want to go on record as saying I think they're great athletes. I think they have great physiques, and I don't like the storyline. I think America's culture is going in the toilet, and I think somewhere along the line people have to say our cultural values are more important than the money we can make. But there's lots of people who are never going to say that. So I don't like the storylines, a lot of what I see. And I think most of them aren't wrestlers. 90% of them aren't wrestlers. Am I criticizing them? No, because I think they're terrific athletes. But I don't think they're wrestlers.
When I remember the old Wigan wrestlers, even though I was a wrestler, and I watched the old fellas wrestle, I couldn't tell whether it was bent or it wasn't bent. You couldn't tell because they were that good of craftsmen. And it wasn't exaggerated beyond all recognition. And I always think that professional wrestling, when it got pretty bad, they couldn't run a show in Wigan. It was impossible to run a professional show in Wigan because there'd been a wrestler in every family. And they knew the difference. They knew the difference between show wrestling and straight wrestling.
But there was also lots of skill and lots of athleticism. We had to train really hard because let's face it, we were wrestling and travelling 6 days a week. So it was hard work. But nowadays, it's purely the American stuff. In my mind, people might disagree with me, but it's purely pantomime.
And I think it's always going to be hugely popular if it's marketed the way it is now, with the 10 to 18 crowd. But I have no interest in it, and Luthez had no interest in it, and I'm sure Frank Gotch had no interest in it, and I can't imagine Billy Riley would have had any interest in it.
There was pulling round all the time in the gym. There was what they call shooting all the time in the gym. They didn't do any show wrestling. It was all straight wrestling, and they knew we were the best. automatically. And when they went to wrestle, you used to turn up at a venue and you'd never seen the fella before in your life. That's happened to me loads of times, but the best wrestler won.
I was introduced into wrestling by a very famous name that all the old-timers will know. It was the famous Jack Pye.
Jack Pye. What can I say about Jack? Well, he trained at Bridgman Street and he was top of the bill wherever he went. He was the only person known to walk into Bellevue Ring 3 Saturdays on the run and never get into the ring. Was disqualified before he got to the ring. That was Jack Pye, Dirty Jack Pye.
Very big, ugly, dirty-looking bloke. Yeah, he frightened anybody to death.
He was a superstar before superstars were even thought of. Every stadium he went to, he packed it. The man they loved to hate, the king of the ring, the king of the mat, Jack Pye. I used to pester him to be a wrestler. And finally, he let me be his second. Blackpool Tower Circus, every Monday night, filled to capacity. I used to comb his hair between rounds and look at the lights and the crowd and everybody screaming at him. And my ambition from then on was to be a professional wrestler and to appear at the Tower Circus, Blackpool. And he must have got so fed up with me that he thought, I'll cure him. And he wrote me a letter and said, there's a famous wrestling gym in Wigan called Billy Riley's. Find it and tell them I sent you. And I got on a Ribble bus from Blackpool and got to the middle of Wigan and somehow found Scholes Gym. And I walked in a ramshackle old gym with corrugated roof and ugly people with cauliflower ears and broken noses. And I said, Jack Pye sent me. I said, well, go and strip off, lad. I'll never forget this. Go and strip off. So I stripped off. I had just trunks on and some pumps, plinsolls. Right, go and have a pull about, lad. So this big, strong lad started pulling me about. I didn't know what day it was. I ended up with a broken nose, bruised ribs, scratches, sore, aching all over. A little old Billy Riley sitting in an armchair watching. Right, go and get this cell showered. So I went to a little shower round the back. Picture it now. Cold water. I felt like crying. I was only a boy. And I could hear them talking. Your mum won't be back. So I said, I heard what you said, but I'll be back next week. And Billy Riley said these words to me. He said, if there wants to be a wrestler, there's got to learn to stun pain. Will you be back? I said, I'll be back. And the next week I did go back. Didn't want to, but I had to. And they were entirely different. They could not do enough for me, treating me with respect because I'd returned. And they taught me the beginnings and the rudiments of the trade that was going to earn me a living for nearly the rest of my life.
I think it's nice to entertain people. You get a great kick out of it, but it's something you like. It's all about you liking a sport. That's where you do well at a sport, because you go out the way to learn more about it.
20 years later, Jack was retired, but fell on hard times financially. And I found myself in the ring at the Tower Circus, my ambition from being a boy, with the crowd, and my opponent was Jack Pye. And he said to me, Tony, he says, we're not going to hurt each other, are we? I said, Jack, I love you. He said, I'm king at mat.
Wrestling amateur and wrestling pro are all part of the same network, all part of the same concept. They've gone different paths, there's no doubt about it. But then when I also saw the great amateur wrestlers like Dan Hodge, who had gone into professional wrestling, I saw the great bridge there. In fact, we have a wall here in the museum called the Bridge. and I saw that the bridge that exists between the amateur world and the pro world, and here in America, they'd been at odds with each other for about 40 years.
Now, I'm a firm believer that it's become so big that they should look out and start looking out more for the sport of amateur wrestling.
The British Amateur Wrestling Association's headquarters are located down the road from Wigan and Bolton in Salford. Despite its historical pedigree, wrestling is now a marginal sport that in the UK struggles to compete against the popularity of other more high-profile pastimes. The association has brought in Nikolai Kurniev, a top coach from the Ukraine, where wrestling remains a national sport, in an attempt to boost Britain's chances at international level.
Before Nikolai came over, I mean, I've only actually been in wrestling about 6 years, but there was nothing like this at the academy. You went to your clubs. I mean, the clubs do a great job for you. The coaches at the clubs do an absolutely great job, but one of the things that was lacking was like international experience as a coach. We've had a lot of international wrestlers, but to actually have a top-class international coach come over who's been there, done it, and can tell us how to wrestle what we need to be doing at an international level.
Look, many good boy, many good junior. Understand? Only one problem: no work professional coach. Professional coach work only I am one. 50 million population English and one professional coach very little. Ukraine, same country, only 1,500 professional coach work.
This is our bright star, Brian Aspen.
Brian Aspen won the Commonwealth Gold in the 1982 Brisbane Games. Brian and his father Albert are two of the most successful amateur wrestlers Britain has ever produced.
They all came down together as a trio. Albert was the lightest of the three, and he was the one that took to it like a duck taking to water. And he hadn't been going long before he had a cauliflower ear.
It's a cheap sport. You only need a pair of swimming trunks and a pair of thrashers like, and I think that's why, you know, a lot did it, because there was no money in them days. But when you look at the facilities we had and the facilities they've got now, like, it's incredible. Like, and we haven't got the numbers now as what we had then.
To me, it's the ultimate sport. It's everything. You know, you've your mental strength, you've your physical strength, you need power, you know, you need fitness. It's everything, and you're just one-on-one when you go on that mat. Northwest, it's always done well. Commonwealth and Olympic. Every Olympic you're in Commonwealth, you nearly had your Olympic team. It would nearly always Northwest lads that, you know, come through.
But now, when you start looking back, you wonder whether you've done that. You know, it's a memory, like, and you just wonder whether you did it or not. Like, it's incredible.
At the Fighting Fit Combat Club in Atherton, a former mining town between Wigan and Bolton, Shane Rigby, who competed in the 1994 Commonwealth Games, and some of his friends teach real submission wrestling, a sport that has found a new audience with the advent of mixed martial arts competitions that pit different styles of fighting against each other, a sport epitomised by the global phenomenon of the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
There's a great history out at Bolton, and with the old people, Albert Aspin, telling us about the old time and stuff. John Rigby, who's still a member of the wrestling club, he's wrestled when he was in the Second World War. He'd wrestled all over Burma and Thailand and stuff when he was out there. I enjoyed it, and I do enjoy it. It's from the freestyle, which I was always doing, there is limitations. You cannot put face bars on, and you can't put any locks on or submission holds on. But whereas in the Lancashire wrestling, the catch as catch can, you're allowed to do that. It's slightly more brutal.
Come in, I can come in here though. Come for this. Yeah, once I've got that on, just lean with it. That's going on that. Okay, or here, whatever.
I feel that kind of the freestyle wrestling is a watered down version of catch as catch can.
They what they call, you'll submit them if someone puts a bar on, but that's what they did. They're very timid in amateur, you know. It's right, though. It's correct. nobody gets really badly hurt, you see.
You ready?
Let's
get it on!
He's the crowd favorite. He's the crowd favorite. Oklahoma City kid.
Both in the black trunks. Mustache to Sever. Muay Thai against wrestling.
There's the double. Doing a great job there, countering. Severin taking some shots just to get him up. Oh, he's taking a lot of shots.
But Severin continues to work. Takes an elbow to the head from Azia.
A lot of the same techniques that I use today are the same techniques from days gone by, and you know, realistically, a person has 2 arms, 2 legs, the neck. There's only so many different ways that you can turn, twist, or manipulate. A lot of the same techniques that were utilized at the turn of the century are the same techniques that they're utilizing now. They're just putting it together in different combinations.
I and anybody else who cares about the sport of wrestling is indebted to Dan Severin, because it takes tremendous courage to do what he and the UFC people do. To climb into a ring and hear that gate clang shut behind you in an octagon, and you're in a cage and there's you and the other guy and the referee with basically no rules other than biting and going to the groin. Don't ever sell those guys short. I don't care if you go out there and get demolished in the first minute. The courage it takes to climb into that ring is immense, and I have immense respect for anybody who would do that.
No weight classes, no time periods, bare-knuckled. And you couldn't get much more wrong format. So literally, you could do virtually anything out there. And to me, this was the ultimate test of skill and of mental and physical fortitude.
I think wrestling as a whole will definitely, or has definitely benefited from the UFC. People are watching that and saying, you know, there's more to this wrestling than meets the eye.
The road from Japan to Wigan is a long one, but it is one well travelled by Japanese wrestlers and fans. For the Japanese, Wigan, and Billy Riley's gym in particular, are the spiritual home of wrestling. Roy has been invited over many times to teach the traditional art of catch and has helped organise Lancashire tournaments. Japan's biggest wrestling organisation, New Japan, and its president, Tatsumi Fujinami, became fascinated with the Lancashire style as the origins of the professional sport began to be understood.
日本のレスリングというのは大体アメリカからずっと入ってきてるレスリングなんだけど、でも今一番こう見直されてるのがそういうテクニックというのか、そういうビリー・ライレージムのそういうテクニック、要するにカール・ウォッチであり、ビル・ロビンソンであり、ロイ・ウッドであり、それが今ここに来て見直されてきてるっていう状況ですね。
It was down to a guy called Carl Gotch. His real name was Carl Istas. He was a Greco-Roman wrestler. He came from Belgium. He was over here sort of at the time when places like Bellevue were doing good business, you know, the sort of wrestling matches.
One of the Wigan wrestlers said to him, if you're a straight wrestler and you're wrestling the Olympics, why don't you go down on Sunday morning to Riley's and wrestle at Riley's? So Carl Gotch, being the man he was, where he'd go anywhere, they were like gunslingers. They used to go all over looking for good wrestlers. Went down Riley's gym and he found himself not doing too good. So he stayed in Wigan for 2 years. And they said when he left he was very, very good.
He'd never seen anything like that, what went on there, the sort of, you know, basic shoot wrestling. Is the best way to describe it.
He fell in love with it so much he went to America and did well in America, and he told everybody in America, and people came over from America to learn our style of wrestling. He went to Japan and started wrestling in Japan and got a lot of the Wigan lads to go over wrestling in Japan. So the Wigan wrestlers and the Wigan style of wrestling is world famous.
Just after the Second World War, the professional wrestling industry evolved in Japan, and they started bringing American wrestlers over there. Karl Gotch was one of them, and his style to them just stuck out as being completely different to the style that the Americans were using. And that was how the Japanese got to find out about Billy Riley, because Karl Gotch basically, explained what happened to him, how he'd learned. He did some coaching himself, and the Japanese really took to this style of wrestling and saw it as a very pure form of the sport.
もうカルゴッチがもう今教えられないっていう、だから教える人が今いないんですよね。5年ぐらい前かな、僕がこっちに来てロイ・ウッドを知ってましたから、ロイ・ウッドが日本に来てもらって、とにかく日本のファンに要するにプロレスとランカッシャーの違いっていうものをまず見てもらって、でとにかく今のそのレスリングを始める選手にも要するに基本をまずしっかりと。
They asked us, would I teach them show them submissions, so they brought a wrestler over with them. They brought a manager over with them. They brought somebody from the media. So Billy Joyce and myself showed them a few submissions, and they seemed very happy. They wanted to have a look at the old gym, so we showed it them on the floor in a big pile of rubble, and I thought they was going to start crying when they saw it. One of them tried to lift the roof back up.
Vast majority of martial arts do come from Japan. And I think just interested in, martial arts, wrestling, grappling, just as a sport, basically.
日本は今とにかく空手から柔術からとにかくいろんなそのファイトがこう入ってきてるけど、とにかく一個一個これから各格闘技が見直されてきてるっていうか、とにかくプロレスはプロレス、要するにそのランカッシャーはランカッシャーっていうか、そういうのがだから今ごっちゃまでなってるっていう、そういう分でのテクニックをしたい、要するにサミッションであり、それがだからビリライレジムっていうのか、要するに日本のそのプロレスっていうのは殴ってもよし蹴ってもよしっていう分が要するに勘違いをしてるね。
So you don't see very many matches end in submission holds. They kind of left that period of time, and then they went to that was early in the professional wrestling era. Then they went on to these pinfalls taking place. Then with the onslaught of the Ultimate Fighting Championships, submission holds became more of a popularity. You have Ken Shamrock out there doing his ankle submissions. You had Dan the B7 going out there and doing basically a dragon sleeper, and tearing the chest apart of D'Lo Brown, and things of that nature. So they all actually have merit. A lot of the techniques that are utilized. I don't believe a lot of your modern day professional wrestlers, when they go into their professional wrestling schools, have any idea the lineage of the techniques that they are trying to learn and to utilize, but it all goes back to gyms such as this.
I would say it's always better to walk away from a fight, not a wrestling match, a fight, because you can get involved in fights that you don't mean to do, and the point is that you say, oh, it was such a body, and it come from wrestling club. So you're tired straight away because you're a wrestler. Because they think that you're doing wrestling holds on them, which you're not really. And I've always found out that it's always better to walk away in a dispute or a fight, anything like that. I don't want nothing to do with them at all. Probably I could kill them, but you don't.
There is a certain hold, I don't know if any of the other boys have told you, that you can look after yourself with. It's called a grobit, and I was told if you're ever in trouble, and I went to Calgary in Canada at the Stampede grounds, and I was thrown in with a 6'8" giant called Ivan Krinkovich, who was an animal. I was 20 years old, I was in a foreign country, my first match, and I was getting the kicking of a lifetime. I'm a limey, and they were just going to do, and the old hole came in, and from then on they knew that I knew what I was doing, and I was respected all the way through Canada, the United States, treated with respect.
That is, it's a brutal move, and if it is done right, like I said, that could break your neck, you know, quite easy. So, which nobody wants to do that, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's a very brutal move, that Wigan grab it, and he's done, you know, quite a few people do it. It's a well-known move. It's Wigan's very own move.
They were good because and they're hard, terrible hard.
I just think they had such a hard way of life. I mean, if you think about what it was like to work in the pits, the actual work kept them very fit. You know, the physiques, they were very wiry and not so much muscly, but, you know, and they were the sort of mental. I mean, it must have been a horrible job, and this was a release of the, you know, the pent-up anger, and when they realised they could actually make money from it, I think they just put everything into the wrestling, and I think that's reflected in the style.
We started here in the clinch, yeah? There's all sorts going on. Yeah, and I hang the arm over and I move to this leg here, make him defend that leg. See that? When he takes that leg back, straight through the gap, fully committed, one step.
I know lads who are fighting, they're only into the third and fourth fights and they're getting $3 and $4 grand for single fights. There's not many pro boxers who've had 3 or 4 fights, lightweights or light middleweights, who are getting that kind of money. They're not. It's only, you know, the high profile boxers who are making the money, but some of these lads are making it pair. And as I saw when I used to go on with the older fellas, I mean, there's a lot of other sports you can do, but for something so high impact, you're going on with these 70-odd-year-old blokes up there, and they're still in perfect health. They're wrestling strong, and that's what you want to aspire to, innit? Be like that at their age, not like get 40 and think, well, that's me done, I'm over ill. It's not a career move, and it's not just an hobby. It's a lifestyle, innit? It's got to be, innit? If it be dedicated to it.
People like Shane who take wrestling to a different level and incorporate with other fighting styles. I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, it's great. You know, if anything, it's good because the wrestling is like a feeder to those sports. So any sports like that is good for wrestling. I mean, you go down to that club and see some of those guys train. I mean, it's very hard training. It's tough. They come off the sweating, the bruise, the aching. So you've got to have respect for anyone who's doing that, who's going to work all day. Having the tea and then rushing to a club to endure that kind of stuff. So I mean, any sportsman, you've got to have respect for him, really. So yeah, I'm all for it.
In an attempt to boost grassroots interest in the sport he loves, Roy Wood has established wrestling in a small number of local schools. Roy and his daughter Andrea have run wrestling classes at Withens High School in Bolton for the last 2 years. Since that time, the school has enjoyed considerable success, having already won the British Schools Championship, and the school has recognised the remarkable impact it has had on some of its pupils.
1, 2, 3!
It was mainly through my dad, because my dad runs Aspel Wrestling Club, and so I've always been around wrestling, but I've not always done it, I've just been around it. And we got our sponsorship awards for all, we got £5,000, and we set up in 4 schools, and my dad was finding it difficult doing them all, and so I just became interested in it and started trying to help him. My own opinion is it's the only way forward. The only way in wrestling is to get it into schools, show kids what it's about, make them realise it's not professional wrestling. That's what we've done here, and we've had a great success with it, and the children love it.
There's not a great deal of discipline that can be exerted on kids in school these days. It's fair to say we have a few rascals amongst our kids. There's quite a few rascals amongst the kids who wrestle. But they know the parameters they can't step beyond. They know they've got to behave, and they know they've got to conduct themselves in the correct manner when on the wrestling mat. And they do. It's self-confidence. It's funny, really, that a lot of the lads, a lot of the real top quality lads who are wrestling are very quiet lads, and quietly confident.
I know when I came to teach at this school, I was warned about the behaviour and about the attitude of the children, but to be honest, and it's only fair to say, they've been absolutely wonderful in wrestling. And the children that did cause a problem, we tend to get rid of within the first couple of weeks, because usually the loudmouths are the bullies. And then when they get beat in wrestling, they don't come back anyway, and it tends to show who are the real heroes.
The future of any sport and the future of anything in life, the future depends on the youth. It depends on the young guys coming through. And if you want to make a sport a great sport, if you want to continue with the successes, following the footsteps of the wrestlers that's done well, then you've got to invest in your youth.
But only in wrestling and in boxing and a few of the martial arts do you find that great respect that other people carry for them. And I've seen other athletes, great athletes, when Dan Gable walks into a room, it's like if Muhammad Ali walks into a room. And it was that way when Gotch walked into a room, or Joe Stecker. And if anybody was paying attention in England and knew who Billy Riley was, it had to be that way when he walked into a room. There is an exceptional human being right there. I think wrestling will always have a place because of its great history and because of its great value as a martial art, but the ball sports have taken over the world society, and most athletes are going to continue to gravitate towards sports where they kick or throw a ball.
You talked to me about England and about wrestling at the turn of the century, and it's kind of disappeared a lot. Well, we don't want that in America. I mean, there's been enough of us that we have to band together, but we want to make sure wrestling's around at the end of the next century. We're a bunch of fighters, and we believe in this sport because we believe that there's a certain group of people out there that enjoy it, but more than that, there's a certain group of people that it will make their lives better. And so we're stepping up, but that doesn't mean it's automatic. And a lot of people get frustrated. I may get frustrated, but I won't give up on it.
I was always told, why on your feet? You're a world beater. It's only when they get you down to the floor in amateur, catch as catch can.
I think people from Wigan and around the northwest have a lot of determination. People call it grit, don't they? True grit, and I think that helps people succeed in sports like wrestling, where you do need to have a lot of bottle and you're doing everything for yourself.
I never thought I'd done much at all if I won, I only knew I used to just go in, but by keep doing it, it just comes a natural thing. You don't think, am I going to win? Never entered my head. I do have confidence of doing my job. Giving a thing and wanting him to take it, having a counter. Right, this is what we're all about. Just go in and enjoy it. It was like the war. Never thought you'd get killed. It never entered your head.
Catch can is a Lancashire, I don't know how to say it in English. So, very, very important is a professional wrestler, how to keep.
My life has been one thing, and that's been wrestling. I think when you get older and you've had a good sport and you can further this sport, which I've done, it's a reward. And although I've never been ill in my life, I've been hurt really badly. I've had some bad injuries. And I think the greatest thing I've achieved out of this is teaching youngsters, keeping youngsters off the street. And my reward in my life has been to all these young lads who are now fathers. Some of them are grandfathers. I've had the grandchildren. And they pass me in the street and they say, "Hiya, John, are you keeping all right? Are you still going to that club?" And I think, yes, and it is. I think that's what's kept me going. Like, I'm turned 80 now, and I was wrestling on Friday night on this mat behind us here. And I thank the Lord for looking after me.